Hello and welcome to part 3, the final in this series featuring Eddie Jobson. In part 2 I spoke about the Danger Money album, the dissolution of the band UK, the decline in popularity of prog rock in the late 1970s, and Jobson moving to the US. In the US, Jobson started work on the Green album in 1980 and later said, "I no longer had a management company, a record company, a singer to work with, a lyricist or any musicians that I knew in the New York area. Yet I was about to start my first solo album. I then started to learn how to do all of the jobs myself so I could be completely self-reliant." But as the project was started, Jobson received an offer from Ian Anderson.
One day I would change for a Monday, with freezing rain melting and no trains running, and sad eyes passing in windows flimsy, and my seat rocking from legs not quite matching. Got passport, credit cards, a plane that I'm catching. Black Sunday falls one day too soon.
The band UK had previously supported Jethro Tull during the live tour of Stormwatch in 1979. And in early 1980, Ian Anderson asked Jobson to perform on his forthcoming solo album. Jobson didn't want to make it look like he left UK to become part of Anderson's new ensemble, so he stipulated that he be credited on the album as a special guest. Anderson's record company Chrysalis Records heard the new album and then decided it was to be the new, fresh 80s sound that Jethro Tull needed instead, which was a decision Anderson could not oppose. Jobson's input resulted in a marked departure from previous Tull albums, having a heavier electronic rock synthesizer-based sound plus embellishments from the violin. Eddie subsequently toured with Tull during 1980 and 1981. Incidentally, the recording tapes were labelled with the letter A for Anderson in the studio when recording began to differentiate these from a Jethro Tull recording, with this letter being carried over to become the name of the new album. With the touring commitments honoured, Jobson put concert touring aside and focused on completing the Green album. He eventually found some session musicians to play drums, bass and guitars to complete the project, and the band was given the name of Zinc. Jobson of course played keyboards and violin, and surprisingly also perhaps sang lead vocals, as he said that he could not find a singer he liked. The Green Album is a loose concept work which had more of a deliberate commercial feel to it. On this release, Jobson combined pop, rock, minimalism and ambient music into an adventurous and ambitious album. The lyrics in the opening songs centre on a George Orwell-inspired dystopian future world. And we hear several references being made on the album to the colour green, such as green tie, green sky, a hue of pastel green, green face, and looking so green to reinforce this concept. In the song Resident, the scene is set as we hear lyrics such as "The prefects carry weapons," "There is fear and oppression in the community," "Everything is tinted green due to citywide pollution," and the main character announces he wants change and desires to fight on to create a new town. So let's have a listen to some of the lyrics from the song Resident.
Skyline, the people are unfriendly. I don't know if I'll survive. I dislike superiority. They are overpowering me. Hard time, Newtown riding with the wet I dream on. Old boy standing, waiting for you here. The prefects carry weapons, and they find it hard to breathe. There's a man I think is following me. Green sky, citywide pollution.
In the next song, Easy for You to Say, the main character talks about time for change from the green landscape.
Imagine you are colorblind and everything is gray. Even the sun is pale, you cannot see your way.
In the song Green Face, there is mention of the colour blue and an unawareness of what this colour represents, as the colour blue is foreign to this world.
Feeling so blue, what does it mean? Feeling so blue, looking so green.
The band was involved in half the project while Jobson performed as a solo artist on the other half of the material. Jobson said the album was a learning experience for him, as he'd never previously written a whole album before. Jobson even designed the album cover and created the lettering using his own inks. And he was involved with every aspect of the album. Eddie later said, "It was a very difficult record to make, mostly in the funding department, and I couldn't find the right musicians, having just moved permanently to the States. I also couldn't find a singer, so reluctantly took on that role myself." Resident, I think, best captures musically and sonically what I was trying to do. I started the Green Album in 1980 with the goal of reinventing my own style of progressive rock, but with a fresher, new 80s sound. I deliberately avoided using the Hammond and focused instead on trying to find new timbres on just the Yamaha CS80 and Mini Moog. In a 1995 interview, Jobson said that the album took a couple of years to put together on and off, and I realised it was really difficult to get a healthy outlet for interesting music that I wanted to write and play. Musically, the outlets for that sort of music seemed to be drying up, particularly at about 1980, when the whole record industry changed tremendously. Everything we'd been doing in the 70s seemed very dated, and radio stations all changed. Nobody wanted to play that kind of music. Meanwhile, the whole industry was getting taken over by some accountants and lawyers. I was actually very lucky to get the deal with Capitol Records to even get the Green album released. And once it was released in 1983, they didn't really know what to do with it because they had no way of getting it on the radio. We tried a few normal routes like doing the Turn It Over video for MTV, but it was really awkward. The music video of the song Turn It Over was the first to use computer-generated imagery or CGI. And you may remember another music video which featured early CGI animation, but this didn't arrive on our screens until June of 1985. Now, I don't recall ever having seen the Turn It Over video being shown on MTV in Australia, but you may remember it. Anyway, let's take a look. And to state the obvious here, before this album, we didn't realise that Eddie could sing lead vocals, but I must admit, they were delivered in a pretty convincing manner. And if I was to compare his vocal sound with another singer, I'd probably pick this guy. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't need an introduction from me. Green was to be the first in a series of albums based on colours rather than titles. The Green album cover originally was a shiny metallic green, and without a title, much like the Beatles' White Album. Next was to be Pink, and in the song Listen to Reason, we hear the line, "Green is now, the pink is next," but the Pink album never eventuated. So how about the band Yes? Yes first asked Jobson to join in 1974 after Rick Wakeman left the band, over differences arising from their ambitious double album, Tales from Topographic Oceans. But Jobson was still with Roxy Music, and at age 19, Eddie turned the offer down, later saying, "The hard part about replacing a major character in any band isn't the playing part. Either you can play the parts or you can't. It's more about stepping into the shoes of a beloved personality who likely has considerable stage presence and substantial performance abilities. That's why I turned down the Yes gig in '74. Replacing Rick Wakeman at the peak of his silver-caped solo career was a giant personality to replace. And incidentally, Keith Emerson also received a phone call to join Yes around this time, but ELP had just completed the massively successful Brain Salad Surgery album and world tour, and Emerson felt content to continue to pursue a musical direction with ELP. Thus, Patrick Moraz was recruited for the album, which became Relayer. Now, I have to say I really like Moraz's playing on this album, but I certainly would have loved to have heard Jobson's spin on contributing keyboards and violin on the Relayer album. So Yes asked Jobson again in 1983 while the band were working under the name of Cinema, and Eddie was actually Yes's first choice to come on board and play keyboards. Jobson declined the offer at this point as he was still completing the Green album. This led to Tony Kaye being brought back into the fold after a long absence. But as the album developed, Kaye had some disagreements with producer Trevor Horn and left midway during the album. At this point, all the lead vocal parts were sung by Rabin, but the band felt the album was lacking something in the vocal department. So Chris Squire asked John Anderson to do some additional vocals, and Anderson then became an integral part of the band Cinema. With Kaye's departure and a live tour approaching, the band were again in need of a keyboard player. By now, Jobson had completed the Green album and happened to be in London when he was contacted by Yes's management, who asked if he would reconsider joining the band. This time Jobson was interested and met with Trevor Rabin, who played him the completed, what was to become the 90125 album. Jobson was impressed with the material as well as Trevor Horn's impressive and immaculate recording. Jobson later said the following about joining the band. "Now I said yes, as the album was really good and I was sort of looking for something suitable to do. A couple of days later we got together in a rehearsal room and thrashed through a few tunes, including Roundabout, and actually not knowing the song too well, I had to figure out Rick's tricky keyboard parts on the spot. No easy task." Jobson also attended the final mastering of the album with Rabin, and then appeared in the Owner of a Lonely Heart video, although he didn't perform on this track, of course. Jobson also participated in some publicity photos. Then after the video, we rehearsed to go on tour. I learned the old material and they had some political problems with the name. But everyone seemed happy, so I returned to the US as a full member of Yes, and with a world tour only 2 or 3 months away. There was virtually no contact from anyone for several weeks, and I learned all the Yes material in my home studio. Several weeks later, back in the US, where I continued to work on the considerable Yes repertoire, I did finally receive a phone call from the manager who had been given the unceremonious task of informing me that Tony Kaye was rejoining the group and would be sharing keyboard duties with me, because they needed 3 original members to enable legitimacy of the new band using Yes's name. But sharing the keyboards kind of diluted my role in the band. I basically lost interest because of that, so I chose to leave. Video editing then removed as many of my scenes as possible from the Owner of a Lonely Heart video clip. But here are a couple of snippets which weren't edited. So did Eddie ever play his violin in the rehearsals? Alan White said, yeah, he did. A couple of times he worked the violin, and it was quite interesting. You had to see a solo electric violin play along with Yes. But he did. He had that a couple of times. By early 1984, with the lower than anticipated chart success of the Green Album, Jobson was questioning his position in the conventional record business. Eddie was always keen to develop his compositional skills, musical knowledge, and understanding, even if only on an academic level. He stated, "It was important for me to do something challenging that I could continue to grow with. That's when I went to private music because I was still looking for outlets." New Age at that time seemed quite healthy. They didn't have the commercial pressure of the big labels. And I ended up doing that. I did 2 records, being Piano 1 and Theme of Secrets, both being released in 1985. Private Music at that time was a New Age label trying to deliver more meaningful and deeper music than the Windham Hill label to attract a more sophisticated audience. So Jobson appeared on Piano 1, a purely acoustic piano compilation of several artists, and contributed 3 pieces, being Disturbance in Vienna, Ballooning over Texas, and The Dark Room. That same year came a more significant musical departure with a groundbreaking Theme of Secrets, a cutting edge of technology solo effort which had more of a new age styling to it, being entirely composed using electronic sounds from the newly released New England Digital Synclavier synthesizer. And I remember at the time thinking there is no other album that sounds like this. It was completely innovative and unique. This revolutionary sampling computer and keyboard combination was a 64-voice polyphonic modular digital synthesizer which cost as much as $200,000 US. At the time, enough to buy a nice house by the beach in Miami, Florida. Peter Bowman, the founder of Private Music and former keyboard player for Tangerine Dream, was a co-producer of the Theme of Secrets album, and Jobson said he would just go over and put the Synclavier in recording mode and make me play without stopping. I just had to play. He always wanted to keep the first take all the time, and the album was completed in 3 weeks. Bowman commented saying, "On this album, Eddie did not try to develop ideas or concepts of how the record should sound. He simply created the music in the studio, inspired by sounds he developed on a Synclavier music computer." So it sounds to me like the album was largely improvised, and Jobson didn't use violin on the album because it was an all-computer album, and there were no live shows which followed to promote the release. Regarding the album cover, Jobson said, "The shapes shown were representative of the other world. They could be buildings or great pyramids in Egypt, almost like a futuristic city, to give these things indeterminate size, sort of like a strange mystery. Actually, we even did a computerized video which again never got released. It was less to do with the geometrics but more to do with creating an unknown world that you could sort of get transported into." The Private Music experience was a complete departure for Jobson, and he did comment at the time saying that he wasn't a progressive musician anymore. So Jobson was back with another full-length album and a completely new sound. Then in 1987 he recorded another album for Private Music, the sequel to Theme of Secrets called Theme of Mystery, which you may not have heard of, which again was recorded using the Synclavier. And Jobson said, "Unfortunately, the record company and I were going in different directions. I was trying to make it deeper and much darker than Theme of Secrets, but they were basically giving me the same pressure as all the big major labels. They wanted me to change the album. They thought it was too deep and too uncommercial. I basically refused to change it. I just put it on the shelf and it never got released." Then after about a 15-year break, Jobson and Wetton rekindled their working relationship, and between 1995 and 1998 collaborated on and off on a new UK album with recording contributions by Bruford, Wetton, Tony Levin, Steve Hackett and Francis Dunnery. Sounds exciting! The project was known as the UK Legacy Album Project. Sounds very exciting! Bruford at the time announced, "It was just a thing we did for Eddie." And in a 1998 radio interview, Wetton spoke of the album as the new UK album, and that he had 2 or 3 vocals left to record, and that he was proud to be part of the project, and that it sounded like UK, so all this sounds great. Wetton also said at the time that he introduced Jobson to the sound of a Bulgarian women's choir known as Angelite, when pronounced in Bulgarian, which means the angels in that language, which Jobson thought sounded absolutely brilliant. This choir is among the most renowned ensembles performing Balkan and Bulgarian folk music. Before long, Jobson wrote 3 songs for the choir to perform to incorporate some world music flavour in the emerging Legacy project. Although Wetton sounded excited about the forthcoming UK album at the time, a short time later John and Eddie had a falling out, and unfortunately the Legacy project was abandoned. Luckily, the 3 tracks intended for this new UK album did find their way onto the Voices of Life CD, a compilation by Angelite. The CD release occurred in the year 2000 on the Globe Music Media Arts label. One instrument appearing in 2 of these songs is a gaita, a traditional Bulgarian bagpipe made from goat skin. You may be surprised to know that bagpipes exist in Bulgaria, but bagpipes in European cultures are more common than you may think. Here are some examples of bagpipes from other parts of Europe. In preparation for this project, Jobson located some traditional Bulgarian choir scores to gain an understanding of the history and musical lineage of these works. And Eddie came to appreciate that this music had an almost Middle Eastern sounding complex tonality. The vocal scores are written to capture every glottal, yodel and ornamentation sung. Jobson then created his own compositions in the same musical style, wrote the lyrics and translated them into an ancient Bulgarian poetry that was singable in collaboration with a professor of Balkan poetry from Boston University. Eddie then flew to Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, to carry out the recordings with a renowned women's choir. Let's have a listen now to a short piece called New Day, which Jobson wrote for the Bulgarian women's choir Angelite release. Initially we hear a gaita, some light cowbell percussion to provide a rustic setting I guess, and a solo singer then enters to create a piece with sorrowful echoes and melancholy with some pitch fluctuation. I must say, to me this piece sounds fascinating, and in this next song called The Curtain Falls, the closing piece on the album begins with a dark string opening before Jobson's violin, choirs and a gaita come on board to create a very emotional and enthralling piece. These pieces are left of centre of what we might expect from Jobson, but I think they are alluring, captivating, and nicely capture the spirit of this genre of traditional folk music.
Burn! The day of judgment is upon you! Suffocate slowly!
After the failed attempt at releasing the 1998 UK Legacy studio album, Jobson announced the emergence of a new band in October 2007, initially known as UK3, before being revised to UKZ. The outfit consisted of Aaron Lippert on vocals, Alex Markacek on guitar, Trey Gunn on touch guitar, and Marco Miniman on drums. The idea of UKZ was to form a players band with a contemporary flavour to it. The project culminated in a 4-song, 21-minute EP called Radiation, released in January 2009. To state the obvious, this was a band album which hadn't happened since 1983 with the Green Album. So to me, and yourselves probably, this was a big deal, especially as Jobson by now had been elusive for decades, and although we were still waiting for a full-length album, we were still all very pleased to receive it. With a name like UKZ, expectations were high. Given the legacy of UK, this 21st century genetic variation of UK evolved into something quite different from the original, with this offspring having a much darker, metallic edge. The sound can be thought of as the original UK sound being passed through an evolutionary sound filter, which only allowed futuristic waveforms to pass through. The band definitely forges its own identity here, delivering progressive rock with a touch of progressive metal, I guess, and it's definitely an exciting listen, with a sound redefined for the new millennium, and I like it. The nearly 8-minute long title track sounds a little foreign and aggressive at times, like 9 Inch Nails or Tool, and at other times shows a clear lineage to King Crimson. In the middle of the piece we hear some wonderful solo passages, including a violin solo from Jobson, before the chorus returns for the last time. Eddie stated the following in a 2010 Zealots Lounge post, recounting the 1957 Windscale nuclear power plant disaster, which was a catalyst for the writing of this song. The Windscale fire was the worst nuclear accident in British history. It took place about 100 miles from my home when I was 2 years old. The event was completely covered up by the British government. No one was aware of how close to a total nuclear meltdown we came. The song, however, is not all anti-nuclear energy. The Windscale nuclear disaster, the cover-up and its radiation are merely used as a metaphor for the spreading of political and religious indoctrination, and a call for the free-thinking individual to resist the manipulation and controlling ideology of unprincipled leaders. Here is the video in which UKZ takes us into a world with a clear and present danger if the right choices are not made on the Day of Judgment. To touch briefly on the other songs, track 2 is called Houston, as in Houston we have a problem. On one level the lyrics draw parallels to the Apollo 13 space mission, with echoes of Bowie's Major Tom about it. But on a second and deeper level, I think it is really about lost love. Lippett's vocals sound much more subdued and mellow here. There is no rhythm section on this track and the arrangement consists only of vocals, keyboards and electric and acoustic guitars.
The money's all spent to buy her freedom. Now we're breaking it down, till we got nothing else to talk about. Breaking it down, break it down. Now we got nothing left to talk about. Bloodstains and broken glass, ampules of poison gas, blindfolds and unmarked planes vanish like a ripple on the lake. All I made was one mistake and a code I could not break.
Track 3 is called Tu-95, named after the strategic bomber, which is pretty much the Soviet equivalent of the American B-52. It is an instrumental and is another highlight of the EP. We hear a harsh sound from Jobson on the synclavier, which to me sounds like an alien death ray. There are some definite prog rock elements here, like a 4/4 riff played against a 7/8 rhythm, and we hear some elements of a Robert Fripp sounding guitar line played over some complex King Crimson-like rhythms, and some dark themes and dissonant textures give this piece an unsettling feel. The release concludes with a solo guitar piece from Alex Markacek called Legend. Just to recap on Jobson's absence from live performances, Eddie last appeared as a member of Jethro Tull in February 1981. Then, apart from a couple of one-off special live performances as a guest artist, Jobson next appeared with UKZ in New York City's Town Hall in January 2009, which marked Jobson's return to the stage after a 28-year absence. Soon after, Jobson and Wetton reunited, thankfully, and returned to the stage together as the Ultimate Zero Project, which was established as a tribute band for the genre of progressive rock. Eddie said the following about the UZ project. The idea of the UZ project, rather than having a fixed band with its own repertoire, was to invite an array of guest players to pay tribute to the best of the progressive genre, including playing music by King Crimson, Mahavishnu Orchestra, ELP, UK and others. It was that project that got me back together with John Wetton. In May 2016, Jobson performed at the official Keith Emerson tribute concert held at the El Rey Theatre in Los Angeles. This concert featured more than 30 musical friends of Emerson, including Mark Bonilla from the Keith Emerson Band, Steve Lukather, Steve Porcaro, Brian Auger, Jeff Skunk Baxter, and Vinnie Colaiuta. Jobson performed songs such as Bitches Crystal, Great Gates of Kiev, plus Fanfare for the Common Man with a full brass section, and Lucky Man performing the iconic synthesizer solo on a modular Moog. Jobson also uploaded a video on the YouTube Globe Music channel showing him perform some jazz piano improvisations in one take over a period of 3+ hours. So here are some excerpts of some of these themes which emerged during this improvisation session.
I have never done anything like this before, so this is going to be quite interesting to me as well to see what comes out. So if you're ready, then I am too. Here we go.
Following the passing of close friend and colleague John Wetton, the brief Fallen Angels tour took place in 2017 with Mark Bonilla on vocals and guitar. Due to huge costs of a large-scale tour and uncertain audience numbers, Jobson and Bonilla decided to present a small number of shows with an intimate semi-acoustic format. Both performers paid tribute to Wetton and Emerson in a very inspiring way, and songs performed included Bitches Crystal, Starless, Rendezvous 602, Carrying No Cross, and Lucky Man. The concerts began with Jobson telling some funny, interesting, and captivating personal stories about the fallen angels. Now, I don't have a transcript of the stories told at these events, but I am aware that Jobson did say the following about John Wetton in an interview not long after Wetton's passing. John's harmonic sense was based on European classical and church music. His brother, like my grandfather, was a church organist, and this harmonic sensibility led him to be a very melodic writer and bass player. I could come up with something a bit more harmonically and rhythmically complex, like In the Dead of Night, and John would have no difficulty coming up with a melodic vocal line that would turn the piece into a seemingly cohesive song. Of course, as well as that powerful and distinctive baritone voice, John will be remembered for his unique and ground-shaking bass sound. In another interview, Jobson said the following about Keith Emerson. Even though our career paths have only somewhat intertwined, I had only come to know Keith a little on a personal level in the last few years. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to tell him how much he changed my life. When I was a 15-year-old classical piano kid, I went to see ELP's first tour. I think it was maybe my second or third rock concert. I still remember the excitement of seeing the big Moog for the first time, and the rotating Leslie cabinets, and feeling the sheer power shaking the theatre as they kicked into the Barbarian. To this day, when I'm on stage playing something like Alaska, I still remember what that experience felt like to me as a young musician. So to be asked to stand in for Keith and rattle the theatre playing the big modular on Lucky Man was more than an honour. It was truly a profound moment that transported me back 46 years to that Odeon Theatre in Stockton-on-Tees, England. I could never have imagined back then that I would end up being that guy on stage. Jobson also said the following about Keith Emerson. He forged the path for every rock keyboard player that came after him. His playing, writing and showmanship was so immense that it is almost overlooked that he was also a groundbreaking synthesizer pioneer and sound designer. And as the complete rock keyboardist, he will never be surpassed. And if you'd like to know more about Keith Emerson, I have uploaded 3 videos on the great man on this channel. Jobson also composed some TV and film soundtracks, beginning in the mid-1980s with a campaign for a train company called Amtrak. In 1994, Eddie provided the music for the pilot and opening theme for Season 1 for the Viper TV series. Between 1996 and 2001, Jobson scored nearly 100 episodes for the TV series Nash Bridges. This is the opening theme called I've Got a Friend in You. Eddie was always on the cutting edge of technology. From his early days of synthesizers in 1971, to buying the very first Yamaha CS80 polyphonic synth in Britain, making the first MTV video with CGI, buying the first polyphonic New England synclavier in New York, and making the first all-synclavier album. The keyboards he has used have included the following: As I mentioned briefly in part 1 of this series, when Jobson returned to the stage in 2011, he simplified his keyboard setup to consist of 2 infinite response VAC77 keyboards, which are folding keyboards by the way, and 3 MacBook Pro laptops running Mainstage plus plugins, to replace all of the CS80, Minimoog, Prophet, VCS3, Tridex Muse, and Hammond sounds from the 1970s. I can do everything I need to do with that setup, and the whole rig folds into a handful of suitcases. Although it takes a bit of nerve to be standing in front of a few thousand people, relying completely on computer software and a couple of USB connections. I don't consider one set of tools purer than another, and I personally have no desire to going back to the days of tuning oscillators live on stage. Even for the violin, I've been able to find all of the old effects boxes I used to use. All of it is available as software. My violin sounds are better now than back in the day. You will probably be familiar with Eddie's transparent violin made from plexiglass. The material has a high dimensional stability and good resistance to shock, and it displays the unusual property of keeping a beam of light reflected within its surfaces. Eddie also had a wire-bodied violin made in which the wire represented the outline of the body, with the peg box, neck, fingerboard, tailpiece and chin rest all being made from plexiglass. Both his original clear plexiglass and wire-body violins were handmade in 1972 by sculptor Guy Davies. On occasion, Jobson has also used a more conventional Barkus Berry vibrato AE model violin which was dark blue in colour. Eddie received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Progressive Music Awards in London in 2017, and in what he referred to as his final performance, Jobson reunited with Roxy Music in New York for the 2019 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Jobson performed 3 songs with a band, including Out of the Blue. Jobson is the first and only violinist inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, I don't mind if it's only a passing craze. Throw away lines often ring true. If I were you, I would stay for a little while. If you were me, would you walk out in style?
Eddie Jobson.